Welcome to Journey to Service. William Laddock returning once again, along with two of our main three folks, and then Andy's visiting as well. So say hello to Andy, say hello to Lee, say hello to Randall, who are all here today. Hey, Randy, Andy and Randy.
See that meek? Hey, I'm Andy.
Hello.
He's enthusiastic, right?
Yeah, he's got it. Well, he's got his post, right? He's got the chickpeas or the wasabi chickpeas or whatever. Yeah, he's all ready.
All good.
Wasabi and beer. We're happy days. We're doing great. We're doing great.
Fantastic, gentlemen. Merry Christmas, happy holidays, happy Hanukkah. What else can I throw in there? It's a good time. It's a time usually of actually, Lee, you said this to us in our little telegram room, is that you often find this time of year becomes a little bit insular, where you become a little bit more hermit-like and you reflect. And I've had that kind of experience as well. And I don't know about Randall, but we can talk to Randall about his experiences around Christmas time too. But why don't we start with that, Lee? Is this normally a quieter time for you, a time of reflection?
Maybe it's just experience, but I think again, I'm going to open this up with micro macro. So I think a lot of experiences are common in the macro as well. So to open this up, what I find about Christmas was that it became very stressful, very orientated around individual need, and very leveled. So people had a heightened expectation, if you like, at this period of time, which inevitably led to a heightened disappointment and arguments and stress and pressure. And I've got to do this and we've got to be that, all external stuff that was imparted or imported into what should have been a perfectly normal family day, if you like. So this has been ongoing for me for many years with different individuals and different groups and different families, but nevertheless, the same common theme of need. Somebody has a need and everybody else has to comply. And because of the time of year, because of this and because of that, you've got to do this. And it went against what I would say now, looking back, my soul, if you like. I didn't like it. I never did. So I got to the point where I was a little bit more able to, or authentic, as Randy would put it, in my own self, to say, no, I'm not doing that. And then you get, oh, you miserable fucker. And I was happier being being branded miserable than being involved. So now I look at this period of time as just, everybody wants something. And I've got nothing to give you at this period of time, so just leave me alone. So I've gone into that shell, and I've been there for a good few years now. So it's nothing bad. It's just that's the way I feel about this period of time. It goes against a giving nature. It's all about a taking nature, and that's not what I believe humanity is.
Right, Randall, what kind of experience have you had around this time of year?
Festivus. Remember Seinfeld? What it was it Jerry's dad that came up with? No, it was George's dad that came up with Festivus. I mean, it's all about beliefs, right? And so many different ones this time of the year. I mean, God, it starts on the 21st of December, goes right through to this Julian calendar January 1st idea. So it's like the 10 days of darkness, like, for Christ's sake, you might as well be a hermit and go into darkness, because it doesn't matter what you're going to say, you're going to bring up something that interferes with somebody's belief system, so happy Festivus. Just do your thing, have fun.
I think I'll add to that too. I know that I live here on the West Coast, and of course we have a lot of folks from Asian countries that reside here, and Chinese New Year also falls later than the typical New Year, which is about a half a month to a month later. And it's a big deal on the West Coast. So in essence, you really have a whole month there of the year, where, at least on the West Coast anyways, I don't know how you experience it in different parts of the world, but there's this celebrate our celebration, and we're going to do our thing, and it just seems to be that's the way it is. But that Lee brings up a really good point too, that I kind of like to dig into a little bit, and that is, there's a certain, you didn't use the word, Lee, but the word that came to mind when you were speaking was obligation. there's this certain feeling that you're obliged to follow the rules of Christmas. And, even if you don't believe in Christmas, there should be gift giving, and you should do this and you should do that. And you can't work here and you have to work there. And, there's all kinds of rules to follow. And, it just seems as though, like, where did I sign up for this? Like, any comments about that?
Yeah, because that's perfect. In where I've been over the last few days, I've been cogitating and philosophizing about where things came from and what I would have chosen personally. So I'm looking at my consciousness and where I sit, and looking at history and these obligations. Indoctrination is this system of life. I'm wondering where I would have chosen it. Where I would have chosen a financial structure, for instance, and where it is in history, because we can look at history, and again, just extrapolating your question, William, we can look at history, and I certainly have over the last 2 years, and found, I think, probably 95% of it to be false, fake, lies. So I just sat there and disregarded history from what we've been taught it to be, Darwinism and all this bullshit that seems just to have been put in to impose another structure of obedience. Allopathic becoming homeopathic, and all the other way around, whatever. Science, pharmaceuticalism, the banning of certain products. One of the things that I came up with was hemp today. They just said that 2,000 times more powerful nanoparticle hemp than a graphene battery. Why was that banned in 1936? To allow the pharmaceutical industry to experiment with petrochemicals, et cetera, et cetera. So all of these things now that we are taught have been to be obedient to as normal. So at what point did money become a factor? Now, we're told that we used to barter because history tells us we did. Bullshit, I'm going to say, because I don't see any time that I would have chosen a barter system in my life, as a way of a meritocracy where I can afford to barter for that, but you can't. Your problem, not mine. I can't see that in a collective construct of humanity where that would have been chosen. It may have been imposed and then adapted to. So what I've been looking back at is, how did these systems that we call life become imposed upon us? And would we have chosen them? These sort of questions, philosophical questions, and I can't see any way that we would have chosen something that would have caused such disparity. Now, we can say that we could have chosen it and not realized. And I call bullshit on that too, because we'd have stopped it unless it was imposed. And how would it have been imposed? Through fear, possibly, or through force, probably. Where did this fear and force come from to impose such a system that we now call life and we're obedient to? These sort of concepts have been going through my mind, gentlemen, this week. And I've gone back through history and my own knowledge of history and just gone and removed all concept of reality from that and just said, okay, that period of time, they apparently had something. So let's go back to the previous one, and remove this idea that we weren't consciously able, this Darwinistic idea that as we grow older or longer in the species, we become more intelligent than the previous species. I disregard that completely, because what we can see around us is a lot of intelligence and a lot of civilization that actually goes directly against that narrative. And that narrative is, again, this anti-Christos, anti-logos, non-logical narrative. And what Randy's, we talked to this a few times, I think, but the logos being the Christed light being the purity, and therefore the anti-logos or the anti-Christos being the illogic, impure, deceit and lies. So all of these going together has been in my mind these last couple of days as to if we chose a system that was this bad, then we can choose a system that's this good. Or if it was imposed upon us, like it seems to have been, it's being imposed upon us again, right now, through fear narratives and obedience narratives. Exactly the same as I think it happened in the past, except this time we've got an opportunity to choose something different like that. So I'll throw that one out there to you guys.
Randy, any comments about what Leah just said?
Oh yeah, I love that. I mean, besides I want to just make mention of Jesus Christ, because that's kind of my first thing when I think of Christmas, and not so much the fact that he was born on this day. I don't know, or yesterday, I don't know about that. But there is a a rising of consciousness, a Christed light that rises in us after we start to become aware that we've been programmed into a bunch of crap, like Lee said, history and, you know, all kinds of other government processes, mind control shit. But it, you know, there is that point. So when we're born into this world, we are God, you know, like each child is a God spark. And then we get kind of off track for a while. And then eventually we start to say, hey, wait a minute, you know, like, I want to be born again. A lot of people will use that language, you know, and that's what Christmas really is the born again to man, to your own reality or your own understanding of what God is, which is goodness in everyone and everything every day, that kind of stuff, you know. So, you know, capitalists will get thrown off track, communists will get tugged off track and all that crap, but eventually we all kind of get to that understanding that we are manifesting, not only manifesting, but co-creating our own reality. So then that day comes along, and that's Christmas, you know. It's like the rising of that consciousness in man. MAS, we discovered the other day, really means man, and call it woman or man, it's the same in my mind. We are the species man. And, you know, I just like to simplify things as much as possible. But I love the way Lee headed this, because we do talk mostly, we tend to drift into the monetary stuff on this channel. And I think that's why people watch us. We're not here to, you know, tug on your belief systems or whatever, you know, like you can go in any direction you want, you're free. You know, that's what sovereignty and freedom is all about. You get to choose what you believe in, you know. But on the side of money, when Lee said the barter and exchange system never really existed, bang on, brother. I mean, it existed for people that were just producers of things, you know, like there was, you know, the kind of native cultures or whatever that would trade some hides for something. But eventually somebody came up with, and always comes up with, every civilization, every organization, every society that we've ever had, we've gotten to a stage of a medium of exchange, okay? So the medium of exchange being something, instead of saying, you know, I've got some beans, I want to trade you for your chickpeas, Andy, you know, like Andy's going to say, like, fuck you, I like my chickpeas, and, you know, those beans got nothing in them. So what else he got? So what else he got is the medium of exchange, something, you know. Okay, if you don't have something that's as good as mine, then give me credit, you know. So credit comes into it. Credit being what? Credibility. You know, you're giving something credibility. So in our, you know, society prior to this ridiculous notion of the dead entity, the birth certificate bond, and these governments conning us into believing that they have something when they don't, you're giving it to them by way of your consent and your credibility, your credit. You know, prior to that, we had this medium of exchange that we called treasure, you know, gold, silver, precious metals, diamonds, and that still lingers. And it has, I believe that's been here for many, many civilizations of man, you know, that we've been mining the earth and taking that stuff and then calling it ours, and, you know, making it into a medium of exchange, because it's definitely, in the minds of the people that use it, worth more than Andy's chickpeas. So, you know, if you take a whole handful of those chickpeas and say, here's a handful of gold, who's going to win? You know, like somebody's got more value there, because humans have put a value on this idea of these precious metals and stones and stuff. So thanks, Lee. That was a great way to start things off. Like, you know, logically, we could have been, and we still do to a certain extent, do a little bit of exchanging of barter and credit, or barter of goods, you know. We'll still do that every now and again, but most of the time there's a medium of exchange, and I believe throughout history there's been a medium of exchange. So I'll pass it back to you or Andy for that one.
My thoughts on this is that for there to become a medium of exchange, it has to have come from a medium where there wasn't. Right? So if there was a medium that there wasn't, and everybody was just working together, what caused the need for an exchange system to come in? Because it had to have come from a place where there wasn't one. And that would have meant an abundant place where either that or we didn't exist prior to that. And I don't believe that. So again, I've gone back prior to this and thought, okay, it must have come from a non-period of exchange. What was happening during that non-period of exchange then? Oh, we were Neanderthals and we were cave dwellers. I don't believe that. There were civilizations that existed that worked very, very well without a material exchange that then moved into a material exchange system. This is the concept that I was thinking too, because I know that I wouldn't choose that. If 100 people or 10 people were on a desert island, we wouldn't create a period of a material exchange system. That would not be our first thoughts. It would be, how do we survive and work it together, looking after everybody? So then over a period of time, maybe something may have come in, but this corporatocrat structure has devolved into basic life, where now everybody is walking around with their own business mentality. So business has become a life. Now, I don't believe that life became business. We started off as businesses, and this is just life. I believe that the business structure of profit and loss, or gain, or equal exchange, was a corporate idea that came in with the monetary system or material exchange system. Prior to that, it wouldn't have been there. And it would have been working together system. Again, 10 people on a desert island idea. With our consciousness now, what would we do? Are we going to say that we weren't conscious back then, and therefore we're just going to extrapolate back philosophically and lose some of the constraints? So purely that, I'm not saying that anything wrong with anybody's beliefs. I was boiling it all down to, there must have been a time prior. And in that time prior, how did it work? And what would we have done? And what would then have caused it?
That time prior was when we were natural beings, like all the rest of the animals, But whatever caused us to become these creators and give credibility to stories is what started this. And how many generations or civilizations or historic time frames that is in the past, I don't believe it's very recent. I think it's been going on forever. I think we've always had some kind of a medium of exchange. And again, who knows how many generations or millennials. Yeah.
We can say back we must have always had it, but there must have been a time when we didn't.
Well, that's what I mean, Lee. And that's what I'm saying. That's when we were closer to God. When we were closer to nature, when we were just simply animals. So but then somebody somewhere along the way came up with an idea to tell a story and then add to that story, right? It's that simple. Do wolves and coyotes and birds and everything tell stories to each other about value? Hell no, but we do. We tell stories, and that's how we came up with this idea.
Would we have chosen it, or would it have been imposed upon us?
Oh, that's a good question. That's a very good question.
And so these are the questions I got back to. There was a point in time where we went from natural gods to unnatural or inhumane corporatocracies. Would we have chosen that route, or would it have been imposed? Again, with these sort of conceptual ideas, where are we right now? So we had a choice to go into this through a story, if we want to go down Randy's route, that we aligned with and we adapted to over many, many civilizations and years. But nevertheless, was that chosen by humanity, or was it imposed upon humanity? And what's happening right now? Is there an imposition going on? Or is there a choice going on right now? Is there an imposition? That seems to be, by the controllers of the narrative. Was that what the story was going back into the past? There was an imposition that caused a system to be brought in that was non-humane, that we then just adapted to. These sort of conceptualize, just thinking about what was without history per se, and what is now. We were talking about logos a little bit earlier, past, present, future. So there's the past. Where are we now? There's the present.
Well,
what will the future
okay.
be?
So the idea of where are we now is beautiful, because that gives us something to work with. Okay. As co-creators, rather than saying, let's go back to just being animals, I don't think we're going to ever do that. And I think every civilization has got to that stage and said, okay, let's barter and trade. and then it came back around again. So is it imposed, or is it something that we can't let go of because it was there already? Each generation, each civilization had some kind of a form of a medium of exchange. So again, that's where I use that language, working with and not against. So what have we got now? We've got a beautiful opportunity with a monetary system that may have well been deceptive, don't get me wrong, especially the credit system that's based on our autographs and agreements, you know. But the idea of putting value on something and using that as a medium of exchange to continue to do what we're doing, building beautiful structures, you know, like the potential of building even better structures, getting away from the destruction and the, you know, warring equipment, you know, weapons and stuff like that. We've got lots of opportunity to just take what we've got here and now and roll with it, you know, keep it moving.
So we make a choice and we impose our will, as opposed to a choice being made for us and an imposition upon us as a collective, is where I see the choice and the point of time that we're in right now. We impose the new system on the old, as the old system was imposed upon us conceptually. You know, many people can have different beliefs or ideas on it. I'm only throwing a couple of quiet moments in my mind out there at the moment of this. But that choice to impose the new system upon the old is down to collective will and free will. And I believe that the imposition that's being thrown upon us at this point through the fear narrative is the compression for humanity to impose their system. Freedom, abundance, peace, harmony, love, sovereignty, all of these things. That's our free will, and that's what we want, and that's what we're going to impose right now. Thank you very much. Goodbye.
It's time to free Willie.
Come on in, Willie.
Come on in. I'm coming in. Here I come. Free Willie's going to say a couple of things here too. I just wanted to a couple of thoughts. First of all, we've talked about some of the things about the past and moving into the present and the opportunity that we are seeing in the present. We might as well bring in the future as well in this conversation and talk a little bit about that. And one of the things that I ran into this week in my own, you know, mental gymnastics that I was going through was something that Randy and you and I have talked about many times on this show in the past. And that is, you know, you're saying that there was two systems that we've predominantly been working out of, the communism and capitalism equation. And, you know, they're two sides of the same coin, basically. And what I was noticing is, you know, like, I'm still in that world of capitalism, you know, like I'm trying to make ends meet, and I've got businesses going and that kind of thing. And I'm looking at it and I'm saying, I can't see capitalism just completely collapsing. I can't see, like, with the new financial system coming in, that people won't still try to make as much money as they can and you know, do the manipulations that you often see in marketing and things like that. I don't know if you have any thoughts to that, but let's talk a little bit about the future, a little bit about the vision and what you'd like to create, and any comments you have about capitalism too. So I'll point it to you, Randall.
Sure. Like, you know, there's no doubt that if you took those two, that people that experience capitalism would say that it's better than communism. And people that experience communism would say that capitalism is better than communism. So it is a step up. So however, adding to is, again, my theory, right? And my process that I go with, you know, like add to or work with. So let's add a word to capitalism, and that is conscientious capitalism, or, you know, choose another word to add to it. Okay, to get out of the idea of just straight out capitalist corporate mentality of exploiting man, because under communism, man exploits man. Under capitalism, it's the exact opposite. This was an old favorite saying of mine from John Kenneth Galbraith. And, you know, so moving it forward, you know, capitalism, it's a tough word to drop because it's been, you know, to our advantage to watch it happen. You know, like we've seen in our lifetime, expansion of these cities, expansion of the way of life of people in the nations that experience capitalism to a point where there's, better opportunity than under a communist or a dictatorship regime, right? Are we drifting, away from that conscientious capitalism? Yeah, and it's because, in my mind, the reason for that is because it's built on this lie and this deception of debt, right? So if we start to open up and just like Lee has said numerous times, and we've all said this, just bring integrity into the systems that are there. Call it integrity, call it what did I say? Conscientious, integral capitalism, put it that way if you want. These are the kind of things we have to add back into the mix, is bring in that love, bring in that integrity, bring in that conscientious attitude.
Awesome. Lee, any comments or things to add to that?
Yeah, fundamental again. Let's go back to fundamentals. All of the isms, only all of them, even imperialism, it doesn't matter. Elitism, they all sit in a meritocracy, and a meritocracy is based on corporatocracy, the one being better than the other. So the word sovereign is being lost. Equal has been lost. So we went from a sovereign individual to a unequal within a federalism, financialism, pharmaceuticalism, capitalism, socialism, Marxism. All of these things require a control of lack and poverty. They require a class structure for them to be used, where one feels they can step up in their level of worth through the system of lack. So all of these isms come in through a tight grip of the system, i.e. control of the system, to limit resources, to limit this. So we can develop capitalism in this country or that country at the expense of another country or at the expense of somebody else. Everything in this system is profit and loss. Sovereignty is not profit and loss. So the system, all of these isms require the system. Sovereignty doesn't require a system. You see where I'm going with this, that philosophizing in the beginning. If we were gods and we recognize that in each other, i.e. sovereign, how would we ever have chosen a system that creates disparity and inequality from that conscious level? We would never have done that. So all of these isms sit within inside a structure of control to create the ism. And each ism then is dissected as another separation tool. Which ism is better within this structure? It's the structure that's the problem, not the isms. So change the structure and the isms sort themselves out. So will capitalism be dropped? No, not in the minds of many. But once the system is altered and there is no disparity between the one and the other because equality is brought in, then capitalism will be shed like an unused layer. It's a different kind of concept for me. So the ism in the mind, the way you break down capitalism, isn't to destroy capitalism because it works within this system, kind of inhumanely and uncivil, but kind of. The ones that benefit see it as good, the ones that don't see it, and whatever. It's the whole thing that's creating these isms that we need to address, and that's what I look at with the GPMS. Randy does with the DOSM, ultimately. Is to address the system of control that the isms sit under. And that's where I think we are right now, is this, we're recognizing the system fault or the system failure, as opposed to the ism failure as a byproduct of the system.
I had a simple question for you, Lee, that just popped in my head as you were sharing there. To get rid of that structured system that you've been talking about, is it necessary that we actually have to go through a period of chaos as a form of unlearning to get to that sovereign state where we don't have to, have any structure at all?
We don't need to get rid of the system per se. We don't need to destroy anything. I do, and I have learned to work with Randy's words of working with and never against, albeit sometimes it seems against. It's not removing the system, it's changing its polarity from negative to positive, from malevolent to benevolent. So you alter the top of the system into a benevolent equality, and then you create the sovereignty underneath it and allow that to organically unfold. So nothing changes except you go from malevolence to benevolence, i.e. freedom, and then individuals walk through that, learning as they move. This is why I look at the environment change as opposed to the individual change. You don't need to learn sovereignty, you become sovereign. You are sovereign, you don't need to learn it. You don't need to unlearn anything, you just become inside a new environment. You know, and this is what we speak to with the GPMS idea. You're turning the system around and putting it and giving it to humanity and using it benevolently with abundance, as opposed to malevolently with lack, which is where we are now. So all that would happen overnight is the system would switch from malevolence and lack to abundance and benevolence. Now watch what the human collective do. That kind of conceptualization, of course, disseminating that down to the minutiae is difficult in this moment. But the conceptualization of the system and the subsystems underneath it and the control of that, just inverting back or forward to a benevolence from malevolence, and then allow it to organically unfold.
Now, another C word that comes to mind, Randall, is cooperation as well, a cooperative means of doing things. And what I was getting from what Lee was saying is that in order to, and this is my assumption, you know, so I could be off here from the way Lee thinks about it, but to me, you can't be completely sovereign unless everyone sort of agrees to be in that same state in order to make things work in a cooperative fashion. So we still have leaders who want to keep the old system. And that I don't think it's a stretch to say that. And I think that there's a lot of evidence of that, just based on what we're seeing in the world right now. Is there is this push-pull, you know, this old system that's trying to reestablish itself, perhaps looking a little different, but still wanting to have that hierarchical structure versus a cooperative structure where everyone is on the same footing. So any thoughts or comments, Randall? And I'll go throw it back to Lee after you.
Sure. Yeah. Like cooperative creation. Okay. So co-creation is what came to mind when you were talking about C words there, because it's like you said, it's not just leaders, it's people that are going to resist change. And they're resisting it everywhere around us. I mean, there's still the majority of people by far that are wandering around outside or in the grocery stores are like this, you know, so they're resisting it. They're not opening their mind to the co-creative aspect of this. The people that are out there saying, look at, you know, couldn't you take a look at what we're saying? You know, like there's consciousness, there's logic, there's common sense behind what I'm saying. Couldn't you just open up your mind to that? No, you know, and off they go, you know, with their diaper on their face. So it's not just leaders, you know, it's the people. And so I'd like to address what you said earlier before we get too far into this thing, because we're going to be January 2nd if we do this again, which we probably will next Sunday. But that'll be after the New Year's resolution day. And you mentioned that you wanted to, you know, bring that in to see what we thought about what we would like to see. And with me, it's the same as always. It's co-creation, adding to. And in a monetary sense, that amounts to, instead of saying, you know, we've got to destroy the credit system, let's just add to it. So the people that want to continue in that credit system, that still want to say, you know, I have a goal for myself, not for humanity, but I have a goal for myself. Let them go to the bank. Let them, you know, keep those interest rates at 0.02 or something like that. Get rid of that ridiculous usury that banks have done with us, but allow capitalists to continue to do their thing, whether it's small business. You asked me a question about this earlier in the week, William, and, you know, I think that's where it belongs, is still in that realm. We've gotten down to very low interest rates for a number of years now. We haven't seen the 20% that we saw in the 1980s that took a lot of us and wiped out a big chunk of our capitalist gains, you know, and maybe in one of those. But, you know, we've seen that kind of settling, where the idea of another question you came up with was comfort income for everyone. Well, that's going to be at an organized, you know, administrative level too. So people are going to have to cooperate to get that done, you know, and right now we call it government. And is that going to change overnight? I don't think so. People are still going to use that word. So at that level is where and that's where I promoted it, was when I was running for mayor, was at that so-called government level, to get that part in. But on the private level, and my wish for humanity, as always, is to add to and take this unlimited amount of abundant, asset-backed, precious treasure, resources of Mother Earth, whatever words you want to put on it, and release that to more private projects, okay? Private projects that will step in and look after the comfort of people that are in need if the governments don't do it. And guess what will happen then? People will just not pay attention to government after a while. If they say, well, wait a minute, these guys are looking after all of the people on the streets. What the hell do we need the government for? To build roads and stuff? These guys got money. They can build the roads too. They can build their own cities if they want. So it'll just kind of, you know, fall away from the idea of these, or, you know, corporate governments and stuff. So that is where I see it going. And that's where I know it's going personally, not because I'm a scientist, but because I'm involved in it and I see it. And not only see it in terms of the, you know, the abundant amount of treasure and gold and silver and everything that is not even anywhere near the banking system in a safekeeping receipt or an assay, a measurement. You know, people don't want to open their minds to that. That's fine. But as we've said numerous times, history is full of shit. We've been mining those materials on this plane of existence for thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, or maybe millions of years. I don't know how long, but it's still here. And there's piles of it. And there's caves filled with it. And it's dumped in the deuterium down in the deep part of Mariana's Trench and in the ocean caverns and stuff like that. It's everywhere. So, you know, that's my goal, and my job is to bring that into the banks and then put it into the hands of conscious, integral, beautiful projects that are good for everyone and everything every day, that don't think in terms of capitalism and don't think in terms of exploiting mankind, that are continuing to think in terms of generosity, philanthropy, not so much charity, because, you know, it's still going to have some value, but consciousness and love and, you know, kindness, all those kind of words. So that's my little spin on that future thing for you, William.
Thank you, Randall. I know that when I talk with, you know, with future ideas or talking about the future with Lee, oftentimes it's not a place that you want to go, because it doesn't necessarily, the way I understand it, doesn't necessarily mean that we're looking at the present or staying in the present when we do that. Is there any comments that you want to say or add to what Randall said and anything that I just said, Lee?
No, what Randy talks to is beautiful, and this is why it's always been aligned with what I talk to with the GPMS. The transitional periods, I don't see them as necessary, but what I see as necessary is mute in the bigger, grander scheme of things. So through a transition, through bringing these funds in that Randy talks about and using them privately for funding is awesome in the interim. I still look to, though, the point where the lies become reality for the collective. So the undeniable truth having to be accepted or ignored, as opposed to the indoctrinated truth being followed. So I see a time very, very, very soon where my New Year's resolution would be the same as every day: truth, the highest truth for your consciousness to be delivered to you in that now. So I'm not going to say truth to whatever level, because it depends on the level of the individual, but enough truth for them to lose their faith in the system that is indoctrinated and is full of lies and obfuscation and deceit, that they have to then change their paradigm slightly enough to open their mind to different concepts like Randy was talking to. At that point, then, will governments exist? Well, who's giving us the lies? And who's purporting the lies? We call them leaders. Do they lead? Or do they just read a narrative that seems to be the same over and over and over again? If we look back through the fake history, that playbook doesn't change. Fear, intimidation, force, manipulation brings about the acceptance. Well, I think we're at a point in time where the collective energies are saying, no, we're not going to accept that anymore. And so this is where GPMS sits at that point of a choice to take the system and own the system, but not individually, as a whole, and then reuse the same system differently with sovereignty in mind and equality in mind and parity in mind. Will the collective choose that when truth becomes undeniable? I believe so. And the choice is already there. It's just can't be seen at the moment because levels of consciousness still believe the existing can go back. That's fine, you know, and this is where the treasures come in and all of the rest of the gold and the capitalistic ideas and the system being the system, and it's we can't do anything about it. We've got to work with it. I agree, but we can work with it and take charge of it. So all of these go together to one, and this is that unity. And that, you know, you use the word cooperation. Well, this is all about cooperation, but on a collective scale. Now, I know that there's social and societal and cultural differences between where I am and 200 miles up the road. Well, can we cooperate? Of course we can if we have a common goal. But if we're both faced with lack and needing to profit from the exchange, then that's going to relinquish or disempower the cooperation. If we're faced with what can we do for each other without lack, then we can cooperate a lot better. Do you see? So this unity brings cooperation, and the unity is brought for me by truth, real truth, undeniable truth of what has been going on. And I believe we're very, very close to that dropping in the masses. They're already very, very confused and bewildered about these C words, not cooperation, but the other one, Divok, and what's going on with that and the juice and all of this, that and the other, and that anti-logos, that illogical mindset that's being narrated through the government talking heads as well as the mainstream media talking heads. The same narrative, nobody else can speak, censorship, it's being seen. How much of this before it becomes undeniable that these structures are being used malevolently? I don't know. I don't know about the collective, how long that will take, but it's not far away for every single system to be seen as malevolent and controlled by a same narrative. Is that narrative humane? No. So what is it then? Inhumane? Yes, it must be by definition. Who created it? Do we want it? Do we want to choose that again? Can we create a better system? Is that system going to be looping back to the old? Blah, blah, blah. All of these concepts come up. Many, many people out there won't want to be involved. Many, many will at the level of what will be leadership going forward. So the ones that are purporting the old narrative inside the old structures with the old mechanisms and saying, we'll give you basic incomes and these sort of things, bullshit. You're not leaders, guys. You're just reading the script. The ones behind it, like William, Randy, myself to a certain degree, and lots of others out there that are thinking differently within the same system to make it equal, sovereign, benevolent, and to bring back the truth. Will we be in the future leading things and steering things and guiding things with a benevolent, heartfelt mindset? Christ did lights. We'll see. We'll see. But that's what I'm looking for the future is truth, undeniable, very, very soon, to allow the collective. Does truth bring fear? Yes. Is fear a necessity to go through? Of course it is. I don't want to import fear, but it seems that that's the way it's going to be. People are scared of change. But once that hurdle's passed and change is there, and there's lots of people calling for the same change, fear dissipates.
Lee, what I'm thinking too is I got, again, a vision from what you were saying. Some of the things that you were saying is it seems as though to me that one cannot operate in two systems at the same time. So what I kind of got was, what to me I feel needs to happen is more and more people have to actually get the courage to actually let go, at least to a certain degree, of an older system where they were, being controlled, manipulated without even them knowing it. And in some ways, they actually have to let go at least far enough so that they can let their hand free, just to let the door open and let a little light shine in so they can grab something new. It's almost like you've got one hand and you can only grab one thing at a time. And it's like, what are you going to grab onto? So I don't know if you had any thoughts about that comment, but that was the vision I got from what you just said.
Perfect. And it's holding on to the lies as if they're real, because that keeps you safe inside this system. Recognizing it, rationalizing it, and then accounting for it in yourself. Responsibility, accountability. I recognize that I've been deceived. That's frightening.
Yeah.
Because it attacks the egoic sense of self. They couldn't have done that. I couldn't have been, blah, blah, blah. So that first step of dropping that and seeing through it and saying, hang on, is this a lie? Is this benevolent? What's that crack causes then a little bit of a slam the door back shut. No, it can't be. Yeah. Of course, once that door's wedged open, then the light shines in, and it's undeniable. Then you just have to then walk with, you have to shed it. You have to actually just walk through those lies and let them go.
Yeah.
But in that aspect, yeah, you're totally right. Where you're holding on to it, you're in survival mode. I've spoken to this many times, where you're in a bubble, very small bubble. Don't let anything in, running around like this constantly, surviving in the system. Everything on edge. Of course, it's frightening then to open it up and have to release all that and say, I've been lied to. But we all have. We've all been manipulated. We've all been deceived, and we all believed it fully until we didn't. Then you start to find out what the bigger picture. Some people call it rabbit holes. It's not. It's just fucking knowledge, and it's knowledge used with wisdom, not experience. Experience and life and wisdom, putting them all together to create knowledge through logic. Which we're taught not to question. You can't find that. You can't find that. You shouldn't question that. Of course, that's all anti-logic, anti-Christos, satanic thinking. Yeah. As that changes to a more Christed thinking, i.e. logos, i.e. logic, consciousness, then we start to see, then we start to feel, then they start to balance, and then we start to create. And that's that creation that Randy speaks to, that co-creation is the balance. But you don't get that without the feeling of the heart and the mind, the consciousness of the masculine and the feminine balanced in the one. So these logos comes in and this balance comes in, and then you see through, and then you're like, okay, this has to change. How do we do it? And that's where we are.
I feel like I want to call on Andy again here. Andy, any thoughts about 2022 yourself, either things that you'd like to see or things that you get an instinct on that we might see changing in 2022?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I'd like to see people just being kinder to each other. Pretty simple concept, but seems to have been out of our grasp for a number of years now. But I certainly feel as though we're moving in the right direction. There's a change in the air. Given the time of year, got me thinking this week how. Maybe a question to put back out to you guys, talking of great systems of the world. And of course, we shouldn't not put the optics on religion and the religious systems that often are stronger than government systems. And with 84% and growing of the world's population aligned with one religion or another, I'm wondering if the more fear that people have and have had over the past 2 or 3 years with this is forcing and pushing people towards religion again, whereas we've had a number of decades previously where we were becoming more secular. And interested to see how you guys see the need to collaborate with religion and religious people, religious leaders, I don't know, to push the cause and the concept of, for instance, GPMS, so that it becomes more ingrained in society in general, so that we can keep pushing forward with it.
Well, why don't we see if Randall might have any thoughts on that? That's a good question, Andy. I think Randall might have a few words to say about religion and the new systems that we're wanting to bring in.
Oh boy, yeah, that's beautiful. I mean, religion isn't really a word that I like to use much, but spirituality. And we got so disappointed with patriarchal spirituality in my lifetime that many people just went into other things, like Galactic Federation of Light keeps coming to mind, or, words like that. but it was funny. One of my friends put up a post the other day about Saint Germain, and all of a sudden there was not just Saint Germain, but this lady, I can't remember what her name is, beside her and him in the picture. And I'm like, yes, you know, we got to get that balance of that feminine and masculine going here again, you know, because we've been patriarchal in that religious aspect for so long. The fucking Pope, you know, excuse my language. We won't get banned for that though. And then we got the other, you know, idea of monarchy, which is not supposed to bring in the religious aspect, but yet we call the Queen of England a sovereign direct with God. Bullshit. She was taking orders from the Pope and the guys in the banking lords of London and the President of the United States, for Christ's sake. You know, like she hasn't had a position of sovereign authority directly connected to God. Nobody has. But we've got this opportunity now, Andy, to bring that spirituality up. And that's why I'm so enamored with this divine order of Saint Mary, Santa Maria, whatever you want to call her, but the Virgin Mary, not a virgin as in, you know, immaculate conception. I'm not buying that story, guys, but it, you know, these virgin women that, you know, are divine, right? So bringing that balance back in. And the only religious story that even comes close to touching on balance is Jesus and Mary. And even that, then everybody just Jesus, 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 you know, like Jesus Christ, you know, what about Mary? What about the mother of Jesus Christ? You know, bring in those stories of that feminine to bring that balance back, not to take out the patriarchal, but to bring balance in. And that masculine feminine is so much a part of us to do, like Lee was mentioning earlier. You know, the work has to start within. If you're a masculine, you know, alpha male, bring yourself to that sigma at the very least. If you don't want to be a omega, you know, like I learned that word sigma in that male structure in a psychological sense. Again, just stories, but a story that I like. It's bringing that balance, that masculine, feminine, that alpha, omega into that sigma, into that middle ground, and bring in your love and bring in your compassion and your kindness. And then as society sees that example from groups like Divine Order of Santa Maria, which, you know, you can believe it or not, but we are in the middle of a treaty with the other churches around the world right now, led by the Greek Orthodox, the Russian Orthodox Church, to bring in a treaty to these other organizations, to the Roman Catholic ridiculous Pope-led story. You know, like, let's bring that idea and keep that word in the forefront. Divine Order of Santa Maria, the word Mary, the army behind Jesus, Maryarmy. You know, like it's that feminine that needs to get more recognition. And I've been doing that this Christmas with my videos and my writing and stuff. It's like, God, you know, like, it's easy to be a boy. Look at us, you know, we're just a bunch of boys. And the women, for some reason, don't want to come to our program, this Journey to Service. See, we've kind of put it out there, but this is just a bunch of boys, because we are, you know, excited about creation, but we are also trying to nurture that process, which is the divine feminine idea of expansion and growth and adding to and working with and all that. To me, that is the encouraging beauty of the divine feminine. And I sure hope we can get some women to come on the show. You know, Andy's got a very beautiful feminine nature, and I'm not saying anything labeling you, Andy, but I love the way that you speak and bring us to the ground when you say things like you do. Like, I'm really appreciative of you coming into this show, Andy. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank
I
you.
love how animated he is as well. How animated he is when he delivers the monologues.
I wanted to share something with what Randall was talking about too. And he made me see a few things here, which I'll probably share with him off camera. But for now, I just wanted to share that yesterday, of course, Christmas Day, had a Skype call with the family, and I don't connect with my sister very often, communication wise, but around special times of the year, we get together and sort of catch up. And we had a great call yesterday. And one of the things we talked about, that I said to her, was that I really feel that in order to really see a lot of transition and change from the circumstances and the situations we're in right now, definitely requires the energy of the feminine, because we've seen for eons, well, we don't know how long because we don't even know the history, but from the history that we do know, we've seen it being male dominated, male controlled, sort of that forced manipulation, if you want to call it that, or certainly a forced agenda where things are this way and just you have to follow along, whether it's implied or somehow subconscious. But it's sort of this combative thing that with the male energy, it's sort of forceful, whereas the feminine is more loving and accepting and adopting and embracing. And we were talking about, when you're talking with people with different views, if you want to give them the opportunity to change their minds or to see things differently, you're not going to do it by trying to force something on them. It's not going to work. So it's the divine feminine where you accept what they say, you listen to what they say, you feed them certain things as to whether they are open to it. That's their choice. But the chances are much better that they will be received, at least so that it passes through one of these two things on the side of our head here into the cranium, so that some of it can actually be processed and maybe banked, if not accepted in this moment, because we're still stuck in the old way of thinking and the old things that we're saying, well, we got to hang on to that because we've always had it that way. I was remembering what Lee was saying a few minutes ago about, not feeling comfortable in adapting it to anything new because things have been a certain way. Well, I keep thinking of an argument that I would hear in my head from other people is like, I trust the CBC, I trust CTV, I trust the media, because they have always been there. They have told me the truth all the way through. They're reliable. They're this, they're that. And how would you not know that? Because you've been ingrained to believe that, because it's always been there. It's familiar. It's what it is, right? And BBC for the UK, and so on. So there's a lot to unpack there, and we can get into more of that next week. But I want to pass it to Lee for one final comment from Lee for today's show, and then back to Randall for closing and final comments as well. But Lee, anything from what I just shared that kind of resonates with you?
Two things. First thing, who do gods worship? Is what I put in for religion. Who do gods worship? What does religion call for? Equality or worship? Blah blah blah. I'll just throw that in just as a conceptualization. I'm not anti-religious. I'm just anti the belief in religion. You go past it. So it's got its place, but again, I would ask the question: who do gods worship? So do you value yourself enough? Do you value that divine spark, your soul, enough to say, I am part of creation. I am creation. I am God, sovereign. I am free. That sovereignty, that level of sovereignty, who would you then worship? Did we come from a place of non-sovereignty into religion, or did we come from a place of sovereignty where you knew that into religion? Was religion chosen or imposed? We loop back to that first thing again, right? Second one on what you're saying about the balance is the feeling versus the consciousness. Where you're looking at the masculine strength, I see this prevalently as the base value masculine. There's you got the base value feminine, you got the base value masculine, the masculine strength, the fight. And the higher conceptual masculine would be the consciousness, the logic, base consciousness, feminine, sexuality, these sort of things, possibly then into feeling and nurture and love, as the higher concept feminines. So as these two start to harmonize and balance together, the masculine goes out of the fight and the strength and the force into the consciousness, and the feminine feeling comes in and the love comes in, and those aspects both balance each other out. And then you start to feel what is happening, as opposed to thinking it from a fight place or a profit and loss. You start to feel it. Now it doesn't make sense. Now it goes against my balance. Now it goes against my feeling of love and consciousness. Now it's anti-logos. Now it's illogical. It doesn't feel right. It doesn't think right. Something wrong. Whereas before, when you're imbalanced, you're in the fight mode and the sexuality mode, if you want, the baser instincts, where you're not questioning. It doesn't feel wrong. It just is. So as these two start to harmonize, and you can call it Christage, you can call it purity, you can call spiritual, you can call it all sorts of different things. They all come down to the same level: feeling and consciousness. How does it feel? How does it feel? It's actually, consciousness becomes a feeling too. It flows as opposed to having to be forced. So now you feel it, and then the information comes in, as opposed to not feel it and think it. So those are those two sort of abstracts that I would bring in for that. I see a lot of imbalance in individuals where they need to fight something, which is not the conscious response. It's the anger response, a base level masculine, as opposed to the higher level masculine. If you want to see it in levels, I don't like using levels, just purely balance. As they balance, they become nice and pure. And then the illogical, or the things that go against your own soul, become more prevalent in your mind, and you question them, and you start to see it and feel it. It doesn't feel right. If it doesn't feel right, there's something wrong. Gut instincts come in, and all these things. You're not thinking it. You're just consciously aware of it through that balance of the masculine and the feminine. And this works in both masculines and feminines. It's the same, the balance in the two. So as you know, talking to what is and why we don't question its levels of balance within the one. Everything in the structure that we live in causes imbalance. The lies, the obfuscation, the untruths, the illogical processes, the narratives, the elitism, the isms, the structures, the pharmaceuticalism, the censorship, and all of these things cause imbalance. The poisons, the toxins, etc., the EMFs. We can talk to it for many, many, many days on the things that are put in there purposefully to cause imbalance in the human species. Why? Because it keeps us off our balance. And when we're balanced, we see through it. When we're imbalanced, we allow it. I think we're at a point of that balance at this point in time now, where it's coming back in. The consciousness is rising. The feminine aspect is opening up. That's causing a balance within the one to see through the lies and the artificial mechanisms that are out there causing this mindset in humanity. And as that consciousness raise, so does the balance within the one raise, and a new choice is made and new things are seen. So I'll just throw that bit in.
Cool. Well, thank you, Lee. And I think that's a good rebalancing going into 2022. Randall, any final thoughts about anything you heard in the last couple of minutes? And of course, your closing thoughts.
I'd like to give Andy a little crack at just finishing up what he kind of summarized from.
I think listening to you guys over the past hour, I think 2022, they're almost unprecedented opportunities to increase, not just at a micro level, but a macro level, the levels of spirituality amongst us. And we should be relentless as individuals in pushing that cause. And I'll certainly be doing that. For me, on a personal level, the past year has been one of growing myself spiritually. And I feel in a position now to take that to the next level. And that's to be much more vociferous and evangelical. So if there are loads and loads of people like me out there, then 2022 should be a pretty exciting year.
Thanks,
Right
Andy.
on. Thank you.
Yeah, nearly broke a smile. He nearly broke a smile, I think.
we have 3 twos in there, Andy. 2, 2, 2. If we keep driving that balance of the number 2 into our minds, the masculine, feminine, all year long, we got no place to go but back to balance. So thank you. That was perfect. I think, well, if you're ready to close it up, I'll say my little thing, William, with peace, harmony, love, abundance, and freedom for everyone and everything every day on our minds. Abundance, sovereignty, health, love, and euphoria. Balance as we go into 2, 2, 2. Love you guys.
We'll see you in 2022. Bye, everybody.